Steel meets sky at 230 kilometers per hour. A propeller-driven locomotive shatters world records in 1931, then vanishes into scrap metal. Across continents, billion-dollar maglevs float on magnetism, tilting trains defy physics, and gas turbines roar like fighter jets on rails. These weren't failures of engineering, they were masterpieces. Yet passengers never filled their seats, infrastructure couldn't support them, politics destroyed them. This is the story of 10 revolutionary trains the world wasn't ready for. Number 1. The Schienenzeppelin. In 1930, German engineer Franz Krukenberg unveiled something that looked like it had escaped from a science fiction novel. The Schienenzeppelin, literally Rail Zeppelin, was a streamlined aluminum railcar powered by a massive aircraft propeller mounted at the rear. With its bullet-shaped body resembling the popular Zeppelin airships of the era, this machine was pure Art Deco futurism on rails. On June 21, 1931, the Schienenzeppelin screamed down the Berlin-Hamburg line at 230.2 km per hour, setting a world speed record for gasoline-powered rail vehicles that would stand until 1954. The propeller, initially a 4-blade wooden design powered by 2 BMW aircraft engines later upgraded to a single 600-horsepower BMW V12, pushed the lightweight 25.85-meter railcar through the air with minimal friction. Inside, 40 passengers sat in a Spartan Bauhaus-style interior, experiencing speeds that doubled existing express trains. But the Schienenzeppelin had fatal flaws. The exposed propeller posed enormous safety risks at crowded railway stations. Imagine standing on a platform with a giant spinning blade approaching at high speed. The train couldn't reverse without complicated turntables. It couldn't climb steep grades effectively. It scattered ballast from the tracks. Most critically, it couldn't pull additional carriages, making it commercially useless for passenger service. Krukenberg modified the design in 1932, removing the propeller and installing hydraulic transmission, but the damage was done. The Deutsche Reichsbahn decided to pursue conventional diesel-powered trains instead, leading to the successful Flying Hamburger in 1933. By 1939, the Schienenzeppelin was dismantled, its aluminum needed for German military aircraft production. Only one was ever built. Today it lives on as a beautiful footnote in railway history, a testament to what happens when aviation meets rail with spectacular but impractical results. Number 2. The GM Aerotrain. In the mid-1950s, American railways faced an existential crisis. Highways and airlines were stealing passengers at an alarming rate. General Motors' electromotive division believed they had the answer. The Aerotrain, a sleek, futuristic passenger train that looked like something from the Jetsons. The Aerotrain borrowed design elements from GM buses, featuring lightweight construction, large slanted windows, and streamlined aluminum bodies. The locomotive used an EMD LWT-12 diesel-electric power plant, and the cars were designed to provide a smooth, comfortable ride using an innovative air suspension system. Visually, it was stunning, a promise of modernity that American railroads desperately needed. But the Aerotrain became a disaster in practice. The air suspension system, designed to provide comfort, did exactly the opposite. Passengers complained of severe motion sickness and discomfort. The ride was so rough that many described it as nauseating rather than relaxing. The locomotive proved underpowered for its intended speeds, requiring auxiliary locomotives on steeper sections. Maximum speed was reduced from 160 kilometers per hour to just 130, disappointing everyone who had hoped for a true high-speed service. Various railroads tested the Aerotrain between 1955 and 1966, including the Pennsylvania Railroad, Union Pacific, and Rock Island. All concluded it was impractical. The styling prioritized aesthetics over function. What looked perfect visually was miserable in operation. By the mid-1960s, the Aerotrains were retired. Today, a few survive in museums as reminders that beautiful design doesn't guarantee success. The Aerotrain proved that passengers care more about comfort than looks, and that innovation requires more than just a futuristic appearance. Number 3. The British Rail Advanced Passenger Train. Britain's Advanced Passenger Train represented one of the most ambitious railway projects of the 1970s. The APT pioneered active tilting technology, allowing the train to lean into curves and maintain higher speeds on the UK's winding Victorian-era tracks. On August 10, 1975, the gas-turbine-powered experimental APT-RE reached 152.3 miles per hour, and the electric APT prototype later hit 162.2 miles per hour in December 1979, a British rail speed record that stood for over 2 decades. The APT was genuinely innovative. Its hydrokinetic braking system, articulated bogies, and powered tilt mechanism were years ahead of their time. The technology worked brilliantly in testing, but British Rail's management made catastrophic decisions that doomed the project. Facing political pressure and potential cancellation, BR rushed the APTP prototypes into passenger service in December 1981, despite unresolved technical problems. On the very first public demonstration run, tilt failures occurred. The extremely cold weather froze the brakes. The media had a field day, dubbing the trains queasy riders and portraying them as expensive failures. Passengers did experience motion sickness, though this was later solved by reducing the tilt angle slightly. The real problems were management failures, not technology failures. Quality control was poor, testing was insufficient, the design kept changing mid-construction. Communication between development teams broke down when the project transferred between departments. By 1986, all support collapsed. 2 of 3 APT sets were scrapped. Parts of the third went to museums. The ultimate irony? Italy's Fiat Ferroviaria purchased the APT's tilting technology, perfected it, and incorporated it into their Pendolino trains. These same Pendolino trains, based on British technology, were eventually sold back to Britain in 2002 as the Class 390, where they successfully operate today on the West Coast Main Line. The APT didn't fail because tilting trains don't work. It failed because Britain couldn't wait long enough to iron out the inevitable problems of revolutionary technology. Number 4. The UAC TurboTrain. In December 1967, on the Pennsylvania Railroad's test track between Trenton and New Brunswick, a sleek silver train powered by aircraft gas turbines reached 170.8 miles per hour, a North American speed record that still stands for gas turbine-powered rail vehicles. This was the United Aircraft Corporation's TurboTrain, North America's first serious attempt at high-speed tilting rail service. The TurboTrain was extraordinary. Designed with aircraft engineering principles, it featured a lightweight aluminum body, aerodynamic nose cones, and Pratt & Whitney ST6 gas turbine engines, derivatives of the PT6 turboprop engine used in aircraft. The tilting mechanism allowed the train to navigate curves 30% faster than conventional trains by banking like an airplane. The interior resembled first-class airline seating with reclining chairs, fold-down tables, and even fine dining service in the Turbo Club sections. Both Canada and the United States deployed turbotrains in 1968. Canadian National used them on the Toronto-Montreal route, while American operators used them on various Northeast Corridor services. Initial projections were optimistic. The trains promised to cut travel times dramatically while providing luxury comfort. Reality proved harsh. Technical problems plagued the trains from the start. Brakes froze in winter conditions. The suspension system had issues. Gearboxes failed. In 1969, Canadian National suspended service to fix these problems. Service resumed in 1973 with longer, more reliable 9-car sets, but new obstacles emerged. The greatest problem wasn't the trains themselves, it was infrastructure. The turbotrains ran on existing tracks shared with freight trains. They had to slow down or stop for freight traffic, negating their speed advantages. They couldn't reach their 120-mile-per-hour cruising speeds because of 240 public highway-grade crossings and 700 private crossings on the Canadian route. In the United States, Amtrak called them maintenance nightmares and sidelined them in the 1973 oil crisis dealt the final blow. Gas turbines, once economically competitive, became expensive to operate as fuel prices soared. Canadian service continued until 1982 under VI Rail, achieving 97% on-time performance, but that couldn't overcome the economic realities. No turbo train survived scrapping, a tragic end for trains that proved high-speed rail was possible in North America. The lesson was clear: fast trains need dedicated tracks. Without infrastructure investment, even revolutionary technology fails. Number 5. The TGV-001. Before France's iconic electric TGV became synonymous with high-speed rail, there was the TGV-001, a gas turbine-powered prototype that tested the limits of rail technology. Developed by SNCF, French National Railways, and Alstom, the TGV-001 was finished on March 24, 1972, and began testing the following month. This was a radical machine. 2 power cars, each equipped with 2 turbomeca thermo helicopter turbines, the same engines used in Super Frelon helicopters, sandwiched 3 passenger carriages. All axles were powered by electric motors, achieving a high power-to-weight ratio. The train was articulated, with adjacent vehicles sharing common bogies for stability. The aerodynamic design was created by industrial designer Jacques Cooper, who wanted a train that didn't look like a train. On December 8, 1972, the TGV-001 set a world speed record for gas turbine-powered locomotives at 318 km per hour, a record that still stands today. Over 5,000 trial runs covering 500,000 kilometers tested everything from brakes to aerodynamics to signaling systems. The experimental program was enormously successful, proving that trains could safely operate at previously unimaginable speeds. Then came the 1973 oil crisis. Overnight, gas turbine propulsion became economically unviable. France was building nuclear power plants to reduce oil dependence, and the decision was made. The TGV would run on electricity, not kerosene. The switch saved the TGV program but doomed the TGV 001. Despite never entering commercial service, the TGV 001 wasn't a failure. It was a crucial stepping stone. The articulated bogies, aerodynamic principles, braking systems, and stability technologies developed on the TGV 001 were directly incorporated into the electric TGV trains that debuted in 1981. Those trains became global icons, transforming European high-speed rail. Today, the TGV 001's power cars sit as roadside displays on French highways, monuments to the experimental prototype that proved high-speed rail was possible but taught France that electric power was the future. It succeeded by failing, an expensive but invaluable research project that paved the way for one of history's greatest railway success stories. Number 6. The French turbotrains. France's love affair with gas turbines didn't end with the TGV 001. Between 1967 and 2005, SNCF operated several generations of turbotrains on conventional lines, attempting to bring high-speed service to routes that couldn't justify dedicated high-speed infrastructure. The first prototype, the TGS turbine à gaz spécial, appeared in 1967 and reached 252 km per hour in 1971. This success led to production models. The ETG, LML, a turbine à gaz, entered service in 1971 with 4-car train sets offering 188 seats, reaching speeds of 160 km per hour on the Paris-Cannes-Cherbourg route. From 1972 to 1976, SNCF built 41 RTG, Rama turbine à gaz train sets with 5 cars and 280 seats, operating on routes like Strasbourg-Lyon and Lyon-Nantes. The turbotrains were considered the epitome of French engineering. Comparable to the Concorde aircraft of the same era, they offered luxury service with kerosene-fueled helicopter engines providing high power-to-weight ratios. Some units even operated in Egypt and Iran. But the same oil crisis that killed the TGV 001's commercial prospects haunted the turbotrains throughout their careers. Fuel costs rose dramatically. Electrification gradually spread across French rail networks, making the gas turbines economically obsolete. As dedicated high-speed TGV lines opened, the turbotrains were relegated to secondary routes. Maintenance became increasingly difficult as the trains aged. By the mid-1990s, electrification of former turbotrain routes accelerated their retirement. The last RTGs were withdrawn from Lyon-Bordeaux service in 2005, ending nearly 4 decades of gas turbine passenger service in France. These trains weren't failures in the traditional sense. They successfully served millions of passengers. But they represented a technological dead end, a bridge between conventional diesel service and the electric high-speed future. Economic realities, not technical inadequacies, made them obsolete. Number 7. The Transrapid maglev. Imagine a train that doesn't touch the tracks. No wheels, no friction, no noise, just powerful electromagnets levitating the train 1 centimeter above its guideway while propelling it at over 400 kilometers per hour. This wasn't science fiction. It was Transrapid, Germany's maglev magnetic levitation train system. Developed from 1969 through 2011, Transrapid represented decades of German engineering excellence. Siemens and ThyssenKrupp created a system using electromagnetic suspension, where electromagnets on the train attracted upward to steel rails on the guideway. By 1988, the Transrapid 06 reached 412.6 kilometers per hour on the 31.5 kilometer test track in Emsland, Germany. Plans emerged for nationwide German maglev networks, starting with Hamburg-Hanover, then Munich Airport, then a metro rapid in western Germany. None of these German projects were built. The only commercial Transrapid line opened in Shanghai, China in 2002, connecting the city's metro to Pudong International Airport over 30.5 kilometers. This train reached a cruising speed of 431 kilometers per hour, completing the journey in just 7 to 8 minutes. It was spectacular, a genuine glimpse of the future. The construction cost was approximately $1.3 billion, or $43.6 million per kilometer. But that cost figure reveals Transrapid's fatal flaw. Conventional high-speed rail cost significantly less to build. Transrapid required completely dedicated infrastructure. You couldn't run conventional trains on maglev guideways or vice versa. Political and bureaucratic challenges plagued German projects. Environmental concerns arose about noise and vibration. Land acquisition proved difficult. Then came September 23, 2006. On the Emsland test track, a Transrapid train carrying 34 passengers collided with a maintenance vehicle at 170 km per hour due to human error. 23 people died. It was the first fatal maglev accident in history. The media coverage was devastating. Public confidence evaporated. Planned projects in the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, and Iran were all cancelled. The Emsland facility closed in 2011. Transrapid International dissolved in 2012. Today only the Shanghai maglev survives, operating at reduced speeds to save energy. The technology worked brilliantly, but it couldn't overcome economic reality. Building brand new infrastructure for a system incompatible with existing railways was simply too expensive. Transrapid became a cautionary tale. Sometimes revolutionary technology arrives before society is willing to pay for it. Number 8. The Amtrak Turboliners. When Amtrak found the American-built UAC TurboTrain unreliable, they turned to France for help. In 1973, they ordered 6 turboliner train sets based on SNCF's RTG design, essentially importing proven French gas turbine technology to the United States. The turboliners entered service in 1976 on Empire Corridor routes between New York City and Niagara Falls, as well as Midwest services from Chicago. They were beautiful trains, painted in Amtrak's distinctive red, white, and blue livery. The French technology initially proved more reliable than the UAC TurboTrain, and passengers appreciated the comfortable, quiet ride. Success led to expansion. In the 1990s, Amtrak ordered additional turboliners from Bombardier for Empire Corridor service and planned a major overhaul of the original French train sets. This modernization program became an expensive nightmare. Technical problems plagued the rebuilt trains. Costs spiraled out of control. The rebuilt turboliners spent more time in shops than in service. But the real problems were strategic. Like their UAC predecessors, the turboliners ran on conventional tracks shared with freight trains. They couldn't achieve their design speeds because of infrastructure limitations. The fuel efficiency advantages of gas turbines only materialized at sustained high speeds, speeds they rarely reached in actual service. Operating on short-haul routes with frequent stops negated their advantages. Mechanical reliability issues intensified as the trains aged. Parts became scarce. Maintenance costs rose. By 2003, New York State officials grew frustrated with the constant breakdowns and high costs. Political pressure mounted. In 2004, a conflict between Amtrak and New York State over funding and operations led to the turboliners' retirement. Plans to overhaul and return them to service never materialized. The trains sat in storage for years before finally being scrapped. The turboliner experiment proved that importing successful technology doesn't guarantee success. Infrastructure, operating conditions, and maintenance support all matter. Gas turbine trains needed dedicated high-speed lines to justify their complexity and cost, lines that American passenger rail couldn't provide. Number 9. The Aero Wagon. Before the Schienenzeppelin, before the TurboTrain, there was an even more audacious propeller train, the Soviet Aero Wagon, designed by Latvian engineer Valerian Abakovsky in 1917. This primitive railcar mounted an aircraft engine and propeller directly onto a railway chassis, promising speeds of up to 140 kilometers per hour, extraordinary for its time. The Aero Wagon was built during the chaos of the Russian Revolution and Civil War, when reliable transportation was desperately needed. Abakovsky's design was crude but functional. The propeller provided thrust, and the lightweight construction allowed impressive speeds on straight tracks. Between 1917 and 1921, the Aero Wagon operated primarily for transporting Bolshevik officials and urgent communications. It represented the cutting edge of Soviet transportation technology during a period when railways were crucial for political and military control. For a few years, it seemed like a success, a homegrown innovation demonstrating Soviet engineering prowess. Then came disaster. On July 24, 1921, the Aero Wagon was returning from an inspection trip with several high-ranking Soviet officials aboard, including Abakovsky himself. Near Serpukhov, traveling at high speed, the Aero Wagon derailed on a curve. The violent crash killed 7 passengers, including Abakovsky, aged 25. The accident ended the Aero Wagon experiment immediately. No investigation report survives from that era, but the cause was likely a combination of excessive speed, poor track maintenance, and fundamental design flaws. The propeller provided thrust but no inherent stability or braking capability. The lightweight construction that enabled speed also made the vehicle vulnerable to track irregularities. The Aero Wagon became a footnote in Soviet history, a symbol of revolutionary ambition crushed by practical reality. Its story illustrates the dangers of rushing revolutionary technology into service without adequate testing and safety measures. Innovation requires not just bold ideas but also careful implementation, something the chaotic early Soviet Union couldn't provide. Number 10. The Benny Railplane. In 1929, Scottish engineer George Benny unveiled one of the strangest railway concepts ever built, the railplane. A propeller-driven vehicle suspended from an overhead monorail, designed to travel at 120 miles per hour above conventional railway lines. Benny constructed a 130-yard demonstration track at Milngavie, near Glasgow, Scotland. The railplane hung from the overhead rail, powered by two aircraft propellers, one pulling, one pushing. The streamlined aluminum carriage used the overhead rail for support, while a lower rail provided stability. Benny envisioned networks of railplanes suspended above existing railways, providing high-speed service without requiring new land or disrupting existing services. The demonstration runs were successful. The railplane worked as designed, traveling smoothly along its suspended track. Benny promoted the system aggressively, seeking investors and government support. For a while, it seemed possible. Newspapers called it revolutionary, and public demonstrations attracted crowds. But the railplane faced insurmountable obstacles. The 1929 stock market crash and subsequent Great Depression devastated investment prospects. No railway company wanted to fund the massive infrastructure required for an unproven, incompatible system. The overhead monorail and stability rail required extensive construction. Switching and junction designs proved extremely complex. Existing bridges and tunnels couldn't accommodate the overhead structure. Benny spent decades trying to revive the project, but no additional railplanes were ever built. The demonstration track fell into disrepair. By the 1950s, it was just a rusting curiosity rotting in a field. The prototype was scrapped in 1956, and George Benny died in relative obscurity in 1957. The railplane represented pure innovation without practical foundation. Benny solved technical problems but ignored economic and infrastructure realities. His beautiful dream required rebuilding entire railway systems at astronomical cost for a technology that offered marginal advantages over conventional high-speed rail. Sometimes the most creative ideas are also the least practical. These 10 trains represent billions of dollars in investment, decades of research, and the dreams of countless engineers who believed they could revolutionize transportation. The Schienenzeppelin shattered speed records with its propeller. The APT pioneered tilting technology now used worldwide. The TurboTrain proved North America could build high-speed trains. The TGV 001 paved the way for France's railway success. The Transrapid demonstrated that magnetic levitation could work commercially. None of these trains failed because of bad engineering. They were technological marvels, genuinely innovative and often years ahead of their time. They failed because of economics, politics, infrastructure limitations, and timing. Revolutionary technology isn't enough. You also need supporting infrastructure, political will, economic viability, and sometimes just plain luck. Many of these failures ultimately succeeded in a different form. The APT's tilting technology became the Pendolino. The TGV 001's research produced the electric TGV. The TurboTrain proved high-speed rail was viable in North America, even if it took Amtrak decades to realize that vision. The Transrapid still operates in Shanghai, and China continues developing maglev technology based on German innovations. The lesson isn't that innovation fails, it's that innovation succeeds through persistence, adaptation, and learning from what didn't work. Every successful train system today stands on the wreckage of brilliant ideas that arrived too soon, cost too much, or simply asked societies to change faster than they were willing to change. These 10 trains that were great but failed remind us that progress isn't linear. Sometimes the best ideas take decades to find their moment. Sometimes they never do. But without these spectacular failures, we wouldn't have the remarkable high-speed rail systems that millions of people use every day. The future of rail transportation is being written right now, with new technologies like Hyperloop, faster maglev systems, and autonomous trains. Some will succeed, many will fail. But each failure teaches the next generation of engineers what not to do, and occasionally, what the world isn't quite ready for yet. That's how progress actually works, not through unbroken success, but through ambitious failures that light the way forward.